You're listening to Tusemezane Sasa podcast that is brought to you by Zamara Foundation, a feminist organization working towards reproductive justice. This space is going to be a space where we're going to have life-changing conversations around sex and sexuality and also the struggles of women. We're going to celebrate wins, but we're also going to talk about conversations that are deemed impossible, conversations around how the rise of anti-gender, anti-feminist, anti-nonsense groups that have come together to be able to bash issues around sexual reproductive health and rights. Welcome to this and join us in this journey of these life-changing conversations. I'm your host, Wamboy Kimani, and together with my other colleagues, I will bring you these conversations with Martha Kombe and Nancy Baraza. Welcome and keep listening and join us.
So buckle up, folks. It might be a little spicy, but we promise you a really exciting journey. Either way, it's going to be a vibe.
In this season, we are bringing you 10 powerful episodes where we'll be talking about feminist twins, feminist struggles, and the fight for sexual reproductive health and rights. In this season, we are going to unpack misinformation and disinformation while amplifying the intergenerational feminist leadership and feminist twins as well. So join us as we make the voices of African women and girls be heard through Tusemezane Sasa podcast.
Welcome and thank you for joining us again for yet another episode of Tusemezane Sasa. It's been a while, but we are back now and we are glad that you're here with us. And today I'm joined by my very good friend. I think one of the other things that I must say is that the podcast is bringing forth very good people who are very knowledgeable, but at the same time, people that you know from the movement. So that is really nice. I'm your host, Wamboy Kimani, and please join us as we talk about how to reimagine resources for resistance and how can we be able to do that in this environment where we are having a lot of rollbacks, but also there's no funding for feminist resistance. So yes, I'm joined by my colleague and my friend. She's called Calivera, but let me not introduce you, please.
Yeah.
Please tell us who you are and what you do and why is this conversation around money and resources for feminist resistance and movement really close to your heart?
Mabibi na mabwana.
Yes, please.
So like you've said, my name is Calivera, Imungu Calivera, and I am a feminist. I am a Kenyan feminist. I am a lover of life.
Yes.
And gender justice is the hill that I've chosen to die on. This is the hill. This is the beginning and the end for me. There's nothing else outside of that. And I think I've realized that no work can, unfortunately, like the work can continue without resourcing, but the work has to be done with resourcing for us to kind of fight the powers that are against us, which are extreme, like they're big powers. And so I think we have to talk about the crux of the matter. Many times, I think even throughout history, women are always removed from this topic of money, the conversation of money, the conversation of resources.
Yes.
And it plays itself out even in the type of work that we do.
Yeah.
So we have to talk about it. The time of being shy, of being afraid, of being governed by fear and bullying tactics and racist tactics, I think that time needs to end.
Yeah, and it's I agree when you say that we need to do that. And that's why we're having this conversation. For a long time, we've seen feminist movements and organizations doing a lot of work with very few resources. And for a long time, when you think about in the grand scheme of things, like according to the AWID report that they launched the other day around where is the money, you realize it's only 1% of global money that goes to feminist movement.
Yeah.
And even when you go to that, 1%, you realize even the feminist movement is almost 0.000% or 0.5%. It's still not even that 1%. And we have been able to do this work with these small monies. Why is that? And how can we be able to think about resources differently in an era now where there's a lot of funding cuts that are happening? Yeah.
Well, I think there's a real concerted effort by the patriarchy to keep women out of the conversation on money.
Yes.
It happens in our homes, and if it can happen at home, the smallest unit in your house where you hear things being said like, oh, me, I do the big things, you do the small things and like stuff like that. If it can happen at that micro level, what does it mean when it happens at levels of corporations and organizations and countries, when it comes to money, women are always locked out. And so I think there's conversation around, we're dedicating this much money to gender equality. But if you look at that money in contrast to how much is available, you realize it's nothing.
Yeah, that's true.
And some organizations, the wealthier organizations in our feminist funding landscape are maybe working with 10 million per year, 15 million per year.
Yeah.
But this is something a high school graduate can walk into Silicon Valley and get 30 million.
Yeah.
Series A funding for a startup idea.
Yeah.
But when we have proof of concept for years and years and years of doing this work, you find that we're not able to access even a quarter of that money. And it's simply because there is an inherent plot within patriarchal systems that women cannot understand money, they can't hold money, they can't manage money, they can't turn profit from money.
Yeah.
And if we have money, then we have power. And I think that's something the system doesn't want us to have, whether it's the capitalist system, the racist system, the patriarchal system, doesn't want us to have that.
So then how can we unlock it? What do we do to unlock that? Because now we already know that the system is already against us. It doesn't want women to have money because then that means power.
Absolutely.
When you think about money, you think about power. And it also depends on who has the power, how is it used, how is it abused as well. So also there's the other aspect around, power, money, and abuse that we also have. And all these systems that you've mentioned are working towards against women really getting that money and that power. But what can we do? How can we be able to unlock that? So then we can be able to unlock resources that can continue funding our movement for longer.
I think, I don't know if these are the answers, but these are the things that I've been thinking about.
Yes, please.
I think first and foremost is naming the elephant in the room.
Yes.
Naming the fact that we're not getting enough money. This is why the work that AWI does is so important, because you're putting the figures there and everyone is seeing them and everyone's starting to ask themselves questions like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean this is only what we are getting? So first of all, naming the elephant in the room, naming the problems, naming the different power dynamics that exist between movements and donors and funders and intermediaries, when fiscal hosts are abusing their responsibility and things like that. So like naming the elephant in the room. And then number two, and I think most importantly, is understanding what our world would look like when we are not waiting for a white man to write a check.
Oh my goodness.
And starting to live in that world and starting to live as if that world existed.
Yeah.
And I think that means experience sharing, learning from our counterparts, our siblings, our sisters in Latin America who are doing some level of autonomous resourcing, learning from counterparts in West Africa, in East Africa, Southern Africa, Southeast Asia. I think there are lessons to be had there. And I think we need to focus on that level of experience sharing and knowledge sharing and test it out and not be afraid to fail, because like everything, you have to go through a process of refining.
Yes.
So this idea might not take off the first year or the second year or the third year, but by the 10th year of you trying something out, it starts to gain traction.
Yeah.
And we have to be willing to do that work. And in the beginning, it's going to be gritty.
Yeah.
In the beginning, it's going to be very hard work, but I think it's going to pay off. And also kind of like dismantling the global financial architecture. For sure.
That.
So now when we are talking about being funded, I think now we need to start funding endowment funds. Because why you know how like a sugar daddy gives you money just for your hair and your nails.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, I want money to start a business.
Yeah.
So
you
like
need to think about like that way.
Yeah, give us money to start our own endowment funds so that we don't need you. Because I think they are living off the fact that we will forever need them by giving you 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. But give me 300,000.
Yes.
Let me put it in a high yield savings or a high yield instrument, and let me live off the interest. Let my work be funded from the interest. I think that's a very important conversation.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I wanted to also mention that I've seen some feminist funders do that. And of course, I work with a feminist organization and a feminist funder. How can feminist funds be able to be also part of the process of challenging this patriarchy when it comes to resourcing feminist movement?
I think we're going to have to conspire. This is going to have to be the biggest conspiracy since KGB. Feminist funds and women's rights organizations and feminist organizations are going to have to conspire together. And what does this conspiracy look like? It looks like in every room where you are, you need to make sure that you're saying that money needs to be directed towards women's funds. Push your governments, push your senators, push your governors, push your heads of central banks. I think that needs to be the message. And I think part of the conspiracy has been to lock women out from these conversations by making it look like economic issues are too complicated for us to possibly understand. And we have to arm ourselves with the knowledge that's required for us to counter this narrative. Understanding tax regimes in our countries, understanding fiscal policy in our countries, and investing in that education. So that now you can come and tell the government, hey, I see you're putting $3 billion in this direction. How about you fund this because of XYZ? How about you fund gender justice? How about you fund healthcare? How about you fund education because of the impact that it's supposed to have? And then I think then we start winning the fight on top of asking for ODA, direct development aid to go towards women's funds and to go towards directly funding women's rights.
And I totally am with you on that one, because one of the other things that we're also realizing is that the intermediaries we have, and the feminist funds that we have, some of them also don't have the money. They don't have the money. And there's no one advocating as well for them to get the money. So I like what you're saying, that we need to be able to have the conversation around resourcing feminist funds so that then the feminist funds can be able to fund grassroots work.
Exactly.
And, on that note, I was just thinking about, if you have an example, you've been now working within the fund for a while now, you have an examples of how feminist funds look like and what have they been able to do to ensure that they resource differently? Because now we're talking about resourcing differently, even with the small resources that we have. And how have they been able to do that?
Right. So I work for a feminist fund. I work at Mama Cash. And I think aside from just having the name of being a feminist fund, I think there are certain practices. Number one, key to practice is reducing the barrier of entry for groups. Because you can't be a feminist fund and then you're still asking a group to have a physical address. You're still asking a group to be registered. You're still asking a group to have a specific dedicated bank account for your money. So reduce barrier of entry. Fund anyone who has a record of work. If they're there, they understand their work, they're filling in their application, do that. Even your application systems, what do they look like? Do they look like something someone who does not have a particular level of education can't access or can access? So reducing that barrier of entry, number one, and then making sure that it's good to have references, but we don't really care so much for having the biggest references. You come in, we are your first big funder, but you have a history of work, we are going to fund you. So reducing that barrier of access and then reducing reporting requirements. I think often grassroots groups, they receive their first small 10,000, but the reporting requirements that are attached are just like, what the hell? And they hate having the money because now they're stuck in the office trying to figure out how to write this report back to the donor, as opposed to being outside doing the work. So I think reducing reporting requirements is a big part of that. Stop asking for receipts. The work has been done.
I love that. And because that's also the other thing. Think about a grassroots movement that is just started, that doesn't have structures, and then you're asking, where is your organogram?
Yes, and then they start panicking because now you're telling them, look for this, I don't know, HR officer, grants and administration officer, whatever, all that stuff. So I think that's something we need to think carefully about. And then aside from giving core grants, because of course we're not taking anything less than flexible core grants. That's the bare minimum. But on top of that, are you also offering accompaniment support? Are you working with this organization? Okay, you found them in the beginning, they don't have a HR officer. How are you ensuring they'll have a HR officer by the end of your trajectory with them? Are you talking to them about it? Are you linking them to free trainings, free resources? Are you giving them funding to take their program assistant to a HR training? Like, is that what you're doing, or you're just demanding without resourcing?
That's a really great point and a fair point, because also we've seen within the grassroots movements, and I've been in this space for a long time. You and I have been in this space for a long time. And you realize that some funders will give you money and there's no accompaniment.
Exactly.
So by the time they leave, you're still the same. So they're not setting you up to be able to get more funding. But we are seeing that, in feminist funds, these are some of the things that they're able to do. And of course, Mama Cash, the likes of AWDF, Hewlett, have been able to say, okay, I'm giving you this money, but let me work with you.
Yes.
So that then you get to a place where other funders can be able to come
Trust
and trust you and find those systems
already there.
Because then also the other thing about it is that in the funding structures that we have right now, for you to get big monies, you have to be able to do those things.
Yeah.
And it takes one funder like Mama Cash to work with you to say, I've given you this money, but I want you to get here.
Yeah.
And here means that I'll work with you. I'll make sure you have, safeguarding policy. It's as simple as that. And then as we are there, I just wanted for us to also talk about the power dynamics between donor. Because, the other elephant in the room is around the power dynamics of donors, donors and grantors and grassroots organizing.
Yeah.
And how, at times, donors' strategy and the way they think really affect how also grassroots are organizing.
Yeah.
Is it something that you've been able to see? And from a funder perspective, how can we ensure that then funders are aware of these power dynamics and what could they do radically to be able to change its dynamics?
Well, one of the innovations I've seen around this area is a fund, I think it's Frida Fund, that did a reverse call for application. So as opposed to the groups coming to say, hey, please give us money, the donors were coming to say, hey, please let us fund you. And I think that is a nice experiment in kind of like shifting the power dynamics and being like, oh, you choose us, and we also choose you.
Yeah.
It's a two-way relationship. I think something else would be letting the movement lead the direction.
Yes.
You cannot sit and every 5 years decide what's a priority. You let the people who are doing the work tell you what the priority is. You do your priority mapping with them through dialogue, through consultation.
Yeah.
I'm also a bit skeptical of the idea of changing themes every 5 years. I don't think that's necessary. I think you just fund what people are doing.
I like
just
that.
Have your money, tell them what work are you doing, and then fund that work, because it's not after we fund SRHR for 5 years that after that the problem is over. It's actually that changing of thematic area is what destroys the work that we've done for 5 years. So just continue to fund groups in whatever kind of work that they're doing, because a victory in bodily autonomy automatically translates to a victory in land rights and vice versa.
That's true.
A victory in SRHR automatically translates to further victory in climate justice and vice versa. So once funders, people with the money, understand that these issues are interconnected, because our lives are intersectional, then the quality of the funding improves. But surely, it's like someone funding you today and telling you, I'm only going to give you fare.
That's true.
But you need to get to that place and eat.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You need to come dressed.
You need to get transport to get there.
Yes. So even your salary at work, your boss does not tell you, now this salary, you can only use it for this thing.
Yeah,
no, they give you the money and you decide what you're going to use your money for. And I think we should take that same approach to funding.
Yeah, that's really great points. And I really like what you're saying, because the other thing about this, movement and the funding movement, we've seen the conversation around, we are changing our strategy.
Yeah.
And now we are going to, we are changing strategy. We've been funding bodily autonomy for such a long time. Now we are changing the strategy to climate change.
Yeah.
And the people don't even realize, there's an intersection between SRHR, bodily autonomy, and climate change.
Yes.
And vice versa. If we take care of women's bodily autonomy, they'll be able to contribute to the economic development of a country. So how can we ensure that then we continue supporting this work and not saying, okay, now we're changing strategy, we are doing economic justice and climate change. And now what that also means is that you realize that also now organizations and movements are starting to change strategy to try and see, to be able to attract that funding.
And trying to fix the buzzword in your proposals. You've been doing SRHR work, now this person says they're only funding climate. You're trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's unnecessary. You shouldn't make movements do that.
That's true. The other thing I want us to talk about, like now we are, in this current context where there's a lot of funding cuts. You see the dismantling of USAID funding. You've seen the shifts within, governments, like the Dutch, who was funding a lot of SRHR work and a lot of work, rights, within the globe, and not even just in Africa and in the movement. And we've seen also the shift within, FCDOs, Swedish, like the shifts are everywhere. So the funding cuts are happening. Mm-hmm. But then that doesn't mean that, the work that feminists are doing is not important.
Yeah.
So in this context where there's funding cuts left, right, and center, how can feminists really think about or reimagine a future where they're able to resource themselves? Or how can feminist organization and movements be able to weather this storm? How can we be able to still continue and organize in this context where there's no money? Let me say that.
There's no money. I mean, I'm concerned really because it feels like our funders, our bilateral donors, whatever, it feels like they were never aligned to us ideologically.
Yeah.
They were just riding with the trend when the trend was gender justice.
Yeah.
And then now that their governments are moving more right-wing, they are also moving right-wing. And so later on, we'll talk about, I think there needs to be political education for donors because we are not ideologically aligned.
Yes.
We are not.
Yeah.
But for the movements themselves, I think, I'll go back to what I said earlier, experience sharing. Sometimes you're there, you don't know what work looks like without donors. And someone else will tell you, hey, we are doing this, we are doing an art festival, etc. And then that begins to open your mind to other possibilities. So experience sharing about alternative resources, or alternative resourcing and autonomous resourcing. Now, I know people don't like to hear abstract concepts, they want to hear practicals.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Can you give examples?
Ngoja nikupange.
I was wondering, when are we getting there?
Ngoja nikupange.
What does it look like? Please tell us.
So something I'm seeing people do, putting out their own knowledge production products.
Yes.
You have a wealth of knowledge as feminists. So either you're doing writings or you're doing blog pieces or you're doing whatever, and you're putting a fee to that.
Yes.
Training other people. People want to be trained. You do that. You have, I don't know how many years of experience.
Yes,
and you can train cohorts at a subsidized fee, yes, but you can train young feminist founders and tell them, hey guys, come here, we're doing a cohort. And it's only 10,000 for 1 month of training.
Yeah.
Or and then you can give a few scholarships. But it's kind of like an income generating idea. Feminist organizations coming together and building their own convening spaces. How much money do we spend on convening on a hotel room and catering? Podcast studio.
The podcast studio.
So imagine if this was your studio.
I'm telling you, yes.
So really thinking about that and really thinking about something that can serve you as an organization, but also the rest of the movement.
Yeah.
What else can we do? Endowment funds. We get enough money, we do our own endowment fund that the interest serves our movement.
Yeah.
What else can we do? Feminist fund management. I'm sure we can find people who have feminist investment principles.
Yeah.
And we can give them our money and they can grow it from there. And then a part of those profits goes towards funding the movement. Art festivals. We have so many artists. Let's do that, Working with women-owned businesses.
Yes.
I think sometimes we look at the big businesses, the Coca-Colas, they don't give a damn about us.
Gender justice.
They're multinationals. They don't care. They serve their business.
Yeah.
But you might find an SME that's a woman-led, woman-run SME that want to do some CSR work, but they don't have that big money.
Yeah.
But they can tell you, hey, we can give you $2,000. You collect from another one, from another one, from another. Just here in Nairobi, in Kenya.
Yeah.
And it can be a reality. So mapping unlikely allies. Let's not assume all corporate actors are enemies.
Yeah, that's
individual corporate actors are allies.
So I think that's also the work that needs to go in, because then a lot of us and, most of the actors, private actors that we know, some of them are for profit. They don't care about the work they don't care, because they're thinking, how can we be able to get to profit off women's bodies, women's health, women's all that. And you're getting me back to a conversation we were having recently about the crisis that we might be getting, and no one is talking about in Kenya, or family planning stock out because of all this, all these funding cuts.
Yeah.
And someone was like, oh, we need to get private sector. And all of us were like up in arms. No. Why? Because we know if they come, they're the manufacturers.
Yeah.
Chances are the prices of these products are going to be so high.
Yeah.
And who are the poorest in our countries? Are women. How will they be able to afford, those things? So I feel like, there's a fair point that we need to be able to look for and map those mapping. We need to map this SMEs, who care about the work that you do and care about gender justice, because it doesn't mean that everyone is really bad. The other thing I want us to talk about is that, there's a lot of conversations around, of course, feminist funders, and they have these principles to ensure that then they, support movements and really drive communities to actualize, their dream and things like that. And most of the time when people talk about feminist funding principles, most of the time people don't even know what those are. How do they look like? And if I'm being funded, when they say, oh, I'm funded by Mama Cash, is a feminist funder. What principles does Mama Cash and other feminist funds have when it comes to supporting grassroots movement and, and organizations?
I'd say I think the most important principle that feminist funds have is movement-led. You have to be movement-led, meaning we take the cue from the movement, not the other way around. We don't tell them what to do.
Yeah.
The other thing, I think a core practice is centering care within our practices.
Yeah.
And what does care look like? Care looks like, before we get to the point where we are reporting your grant for non-compliance, have we had a conversation with you? Do we know what's happening in your country? Maybe there are floods.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an uprising. Are we caring about you? Are we offering emergency grants for relief efforts if that's what to happen? And also flexibility. If originally you reported that this money is going to go towards mobilizing women in politics, and then there's a civil war in your country, this is no longer a priority.
That's true.
You're going to take this money and you're going to take it towards hiring buses to get women out of that village. So that level of flexibility, I think, is very important for a feminist funder. So flexibility, care, and being movement-led. And most importantly, trust-based. If you're not trust-based, remove that word from defining yourself as a feminist funder. You have to be trust-based. And yes, it's mutual trust, but you as the funder, you have to be the one first willing to step out in trust.
Yeah.
First willing to step out in trust, then you build trust with the grantee partner. And that needs to be mutual trust, yes, but it takes time to build that.
Yeah.
So the idea of always being very suspicious of the grantee partner, very looking for the mistake. That's not how a trust-based funder moves. A trust-based funder moves looking for a point of commonality, not looking for where the grantee partner made a mistake. Because there are funders who they're just waiting for you to make a mistake.
And then bye-bye. Adios.
And then that's the end of that. But that's not how feminist funding works.
Yeah.
Where do we start off from a point of commonality first? And then now we start to work through the differences.
Yes, I want us to go back to the care bit.
Yeah.
Because, we were talking about care before. And one of the things that we even mentioned is that the fact that, within organizations and activists and feminists, some of the most feminists, I don't know, maybe I'm sure there are others, but I think that as grassroots women that are starting up, it becomes so difficult to be able to gather paid well, to be paid well. And then also to have the conversation around care. So how can feminist funders incorporate that to ensure that then care, because you see care goes beyond the organizations, the way they work. It's also, organizations are people.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And when you talk about care, it's also talking about how can I be able to care for you as an individual person working for this organization. So how have funders manage to ensure that the care goes beyond when it comes to their way they are funding, that then these grassroots women human rights defenders can be able to live in dignity?
I think a good practice would be, okay, first let me say this. It's very difficult to centralize care if the feminist workplace is not a feminist workplace.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say one of the gaps that we have is feminist HR.
Oh, yes, I
People
agree.
don't know how to do it, but they say that they do.
Yeah,
and
that
it's
one
a
I have.
huge
It's a
gap.
huge
And I
gap.
think in the next 2 to 3 years, someone needs to come up with a feminist HR handbook
Yes.
and train people in the thousands because it's needed. So that takes care of how the funder themselves are working, how the organization itself is working. I know there was a handbook on organizational transformation. I think, was it Hope Chigudu who did it?
Yeah, it's called Organization with a Soul.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
one.
building
So we
an
can
organization
build
with
on
a
that
soul.
type of work and really come into
Yeah.
feminist HR practices. So that's a core part of care. Really caring for the material realities of this person. Like Amilcar Cabral said, people don't fight for ideas. People fight for their material realities. I'm just paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think would be important is creating funding streams and funding mechanisms that also reach out to holistic care of people, holistic security, wellness. It sounds like fluffy language, but it really makes a difference when you're able to pay for a therapist,
Yeah.
for an SGBV organization, an SRHR organization. Women are coming to you who've had unsafe botched abortions. You need to have a licensed therapist there and several to be able to hold their hand.
Yeah.
This is what care work looks like in practicality. What else can it look like? Realistic targets.
Yeah.
Set realistic targets for your grantee partners. You can't be asking someone to report monthly. What in the world is wrong with you?
Yeah.
So this person is busy. They finished an activity on Saturday, on Sunday jioni, they're here writing a report because donor wants it on Monday and the donor cannot budge on that deadline.
Yeah.
We can't work like that.
Yeah.
So part of care is also setting up realistic targets, holding people with dignity, not assuming that, I'm the one who has the money, so you have to do everything that I want. You ask them, how would you like to do this?
Yeah.
What's your proposal?
Yeah.
And that's also caring for people, treating them like human beings, really. It shouldn't be a big conversation. It should be, I don't want to say automatic or common sense,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
that's kind of like where we can start.
Yeah. And I like that, because then the other thing also, even myself with Zamara Foundation, I was struggling to get a feminist HR, even feminist auditor, because some of the questions you get, and not to say that, people don't want accountabilities, and listening to, EDs and realizing some of the questions they get, you know, like you work in Samburu, for example, and you are working with, Manyata women, and you want, who never went to school.
Yeah.
And you want them to be able to sign correctly like this.
Really?
And then calling them and say, oh, did you receive 500 shillings? Or, someone telling you, oh, the transport that you're giving to people, it should be at IGA. That
You've invited someone to your meeting. She's 2 months postpartum.
Yeah.
You don't want her to come with her baby.
Yeah.
That's a lack of care.
The
And then
lack
you
of
say,
care.
oh, the accountants did not approve this charge. What type of organizational practice is that?
Yeah.
So those are the things we need to think about.
Yeah. So I think, and it's good. You need to start, even I'm challenging you. You need to find ways we can get a handbook on HR, feminist HR.
I really
feminist
think so.
HR, feminist auditors, feminist hosts. What are they? Fiscal
hosts. Yes.
We need to get feminist fiscal hosts.
People are taking 25% out here, and I'm like, even the green company for our mobile phones, they don't charge us that much for our M-Pesa transactions.
So,
why are you taking 25%?
So we need that, because then the way you are saying, we need to also create an ecosystem where all of us can be able to thrive. And thriving means that if all of us can be able to get these solutions for ourselves.
Yeah.
Getting, HR, feminist HR, to be able to tell us auditors,
exactly.
And having these policies so that then they're ingrained within the grassroots movement as well, the organizations and even the funders, so that then it becomes something that it's not foreign. It's something that we all know, that they know that if I'm giving you money, if it's not core money, flexible, long-term money, I don't have business
exactly
to give you.
It should be so shunned upon for someone to give you restrictive money that funders are embarrassed to give you restricted money.
Yeah.
The norm should be like, oh, you people, you're giving restricted money. We are not taking your money.
Yeah.
It should be such an embarrassing thing for a funder to do.
Yeah.
And we need to create that sort of environment.
And we're not there yet, though.
No, not yet.
We're not there yet.
Hey, if anything, it's getting more restricted.
It's getting more restricted with the fact that there's no money. There's a lot of, shifts. And the little money that is there, people are like, okay, let's make sure that it is restrictive. And for the first time in so many years, I've been in the movement for a while now, I'm seeing people having 20, 80%. Like they're like, okay, you can only do 20% for your admin and salaries. And I'm like, okay. But then now you find that, people have to take that money because there's no money.
There's no
other options and alternative. And that's why I like what you're saying, that we need to be able to think, to hear from the other feminist movement how they've been able to resource themselves.
Yes.
We need to get there. Yes. We're not there, but we need to be able to learn. So maybe lastly, before we close, in this conversation around reimagining feminist resources and feminist futures in the way the environment and the ecosystem is now, what is that one thing or two things that you can tell, those that are watching us and they're listening, feminist grassroots organizations, and also just women human rights defenders that are doing movement building work with no resources or with no registration? What is it, that one thing or two things you can be able to tell them in this context when it comes to money?
I don't know, guys. I don't know. It's really, I don't want to sound facetious.
Yes.
I don't want to be like, just keep going, and like you're really struggling to pay rent, to pay salaries.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of those realities, and I don't want to sound facetious to the grassroots organizations, the young feminist organizations. But what I can tell them is their work is valid.
Yes.
Their work really does matter. And we would collapse without the work that they're putting into this movement. The world would collapse without the work that they're putting in. And unfortunately now the resources might not be what they want them to be, but they need to also map their own resources.
Yes.
Resources are not just money resources. There's also what in corporate they call it sweat equity. There's your sweat equity that you've put into the organization, that you've put into your community. So also map those resources and see what you can tap out of them. If you can't get money, do barter trade. Do a barter trade kind of system. So I come here, I sit on this podcast, you have a guest on the podcast, I get visibility.
Yes.
You see, now we're doing like a barter trade kind of system. People offer their skills. What are your skills? Like right now, you're a podcast host. You can train someone else to be a podcast host, and just tap into whatever skills that you've picked up along the way, public speaking, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So for the movements, don't be discouraged.
Yeah.
This too shall pass.
Yes, please.
But we have to stick together.
Yes.
I also don't want this drought in resources to fragment us, which often happens in moments like this.
True.
We must stick together for this to matter.
Yeah.
And then I think something else that I think grassroots organizations might benefit from hearing is that there are funders out there who fund the kind of work that you're doing.
Yes.
They might be a bit hard to find right now, but they're still there. And to the extent possible, let's try to build our own women's funds regionally.
Yes.
I think regional women's funds are a huge gap in the continent, and we need to start them, seed them, plant them, and grow them.
Yeah.
East Africa Regional Women's Fund, Southern Africa, Northern Africa, Western Africa. I think that's a huge gap.
Yeah.
And we need to start investing more in that direction. And grassroots groups, if they come together, they can set up a women's fund.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that. And really, thank you very much for coming to talk to us and to have this conversation with us at Tusemezane Sasa. It's been a pleasure to host you. It's been a pleasure to just listen to you. And I like what you're saying. And I think I will just reiterate that the work that you all do as a feminist movement builder, as a women human rights defender, your work is valid. And this too shall pass.
This too shall pass.
This too shall pass.
As people who are there in the 90s, in the early 2000s, they had this moment and they're still here.
So it will pass and we will get there. And that was the other episode. And thank you very much for being with us. So please follow us and join us into the other conversations. Thank you. You're listening to Tusemezane Sasa podcast that is brought to you by Zamara Foundation, a feminist organization working towards reproductive justice. This space is going to be a space where we're going to have life-changing conversations around sex and sexuality and also the struggles of women. We're going to celebrate wins, but we're also going to talk about conversations that are deemed impossible, conversations around how the rise of anti-gender, anti-feminist, anti-nonsense groups that have come together to be able to bash issues around sexual reproductive health and rights. Welcome to this and join us in this journey of these life-changing conversations. I'm your host, Wamboi Kimani, and together with my other colleagues, I will bring you these conversations with Martha Kombe and Nancy Baraza. Welcome and keep listening and join us.
So buckle up, folks. It might be a little spicy, but we promise you a really exciting journey. Either way, it's going to be a vibe.
In this season, we are bringing you 10 powerful episodes where we'll be talking about feminist twins, feminist struggles, and the fight for sexual reproductive health and rights. In this season, we are going to unpack misinformation and disinformation while amplifying the intergenerational feminist leadership and feminist twins as well. So join us as we make the voices of African women and girls be heard through Tusemezane Sasa podcast.